in the world, and it's time to review who the contestants are. Playing white, we have the pride of Azerbaijan, Teimour Radjabov, and playing black, we have, can we say it now, the greatest player of all time, Magnus Carlsen, who recently passed Kasparov's record of 28.51 FIDE. I believe Carlsen became 28.62 or something like that. So Radjabov against Carlsen in an incredible Dragon showdown. So let's get started. So they go to the Dragon Sicilian, with Radjabov playing white, Carlsen playing black, and Radjabov opts for the Yugoslav attack, the most dangerous setup against the Dragon. And he chooses to play bishop c4 on move 9, as we discussed in the last video. Carlsen plays bishop d7, the main move, and now most people castle here, queen side, but Radjabov plays first bishop b3. It doesn't make a big difference. Carlsen continues with rook c8, and then again most people castle here, but Radjabov chooses the move h4, and now rather than play the line with knight e5, Carlsen elects to play h5 and allow that h-pawn to go no further. So Radjabov castles, and now we've reached the position which we would reach from any other move order, and white continues here with knight to e5, the main idea. So in our last video, we saw the move king b1, and also bishop h6. Today we're going to pay more attention to the most common move in this position, bishop g5. So the bishop goes to g5, where it can be very useful in some positions with pressure against the knight on f6. And against bishop g5, black should play rook c5, because the rook can be a very important piece operating along this fifth rank in this position. The rook is very well placed on the fifth rank, and we'll see why as we continue to see the game. So there are some different options here for white. He can play king b1, in which case black will play rook e8. We talked about that in the last video. Usually when white plays king b1, black plays rook e8, which is, these are both basically prophylactic moves. White wants to put his king on b1, where it'll be safe from any checks later along the h6, c1 diagonal, and black wants to put his rook on e8, which protects his e7 pawn, prepares a square for his king on f8, and gets his rook out of the pin in case white ever plays bishop h6, then black could respond with bishop h8. But in this case, Radjabov played king b1. For some reason I was thinking he didn't. Radjabov played king b1, and Carlsen played rook e8. And now Radjabov played g4, which is a very aggressive move, immediately starting the attack against black's king. And g4 is a key theme in almost any way that white plays this position, although he doesn't have to play it right away. But he does immediately play g4, and Carlsen captures on g4. And now Radjabov plays another very aggressive move, h5. I think Radjabov made up his mind before the game that he was going to play very aggressive. It's also possible here to play the move f4 and attack the knight from e5, in which case that knight can go into b5. And now usually white would move his queen to d3 or to e2. I'm sorry, actually queen e2 is not the best, because this knight on c3 is not protected, and sometimes there can be tactics with knight a3 check. But queen d3 is a little bit stronger, supporting this knight, and now black would play queen c8, which defends the knight and renews the idea of sometimes playing knight a3 check. But Radjabov did not play f4. He played h5, a very direct and very aggressive move. Carlsen captured on h5 with his knight, and now Radjabov went all out. Rook takes h5, pawn takes h5, and queen h2. So white has sacrificed a ton of material. He sacrificed 2 pawns and an exchange. But his pieces are in very good attacking formation, and he hopes to be able to score a quick point by having a powerful attack against the black king that black is unable to get out of. So at this point, Radjabov's idea is to capture on h5 with his queen, which will tie the black knight on e5 down to defending the f7 square. We see here this bishop on b3 is so powerful. And then white can bring in reinforcements by playing rook h1 and really have a great attack. The good news for black is he's up so much material that he can afford to give some of it back in defense, which is a very common theme. When you're winning by a lot of material but you're under attack, sometimes you can give back some of that material in order to squelch your opponent's attack, but still have enough extra material to win the game. And that's what Carlsen seeks to do. So Carlsen continues with knight to g6. He brings another piece over to the king side to help support his king, and now we see the power of this rook along the fifth rank. Here it's immediately attacking the white bishop on g5. But Radjabov's not worried about that. He captures on h5, in fact moving his queen into a spot where the bishop on g5 is pinned to it. But white, in fact, has a threat here to capture on g6 with his queen. We saw this idea in the last video where this bishop along this diagonal pins that pawn and allows for a lot of these kinds of tactics with queen takes g6. But strangely, Magnus Carlsen wasn't worried about that, and he played queen to a5, getting his queen out to a powerful square and double attacking this bishop on g5. But what happens if white simply takes on g6, wins a piece, and has a seemingly unstoppable attack? What was Magnus Carlsen prepared to play against this? You might want to pause the video here and see if you can figure it out. If white plays queen to g6, queen takes knight on g6, Magnus Carlsen had a very powerful response. Pawn to e6, which does 2 things. It blunts this bishop on b3, so the pin no longer exists, which means that the white queen on g6 is now hanging, and of course that bishop on g5 will be lost. So the queen has to reach a safe square, and now Carlsen can simply play rook takes g5, and white's attack is over, and black now has an easily winning position. So a very nice trap set by Carlsen, inviting Radjabov to play the very natural queen takes g6, which in fact fails to a brilliant defensive move in e6. But Radjabov, being the very strong player that he is, saw his way through that and played f4, defending his bishop, and now preparing to take on g6 with his queen. So Carlsen needed to make some things happen here, and he decided to give back the exchange. Rook takes g5. Again, one of the nice things about having extra material, sometimes you can give a little bit of it back to improve your position. So he eliminates that powerful white bishop on g5. Radjabov, of course, takes with the pawn. He has no interest in going to the endgame. And now pawn to e6. a very common move whenever that bishop is on that diagonal. Black is able to cover that bishop's diagonal so that's no longer so strong. And that pawn on e6 also controls an important square on d5, which a lot of times white's knight would have liked to go to, where it can be much closer to the attack. So pawn to e6 a very useful defensive move for black in this position. But Radjabov found an attacking resource, knight to f5. Not a move you'd normally consider when the pawn had just gone to cover that square, but Radjabov is a strong enough player to see beyond the obvious, and he sees that he can play knight to f5 because after pawn takes f5, he can go queen takes g6 because that diagonal's open again. And that's in fact what happened in this game. Black played pawn takes f5, and now white responded with queen takes g6, threatening to take the f7 pawn with a forced checkmate. So Carlsen has to respond to that, and he plays bishop e6, again fighting to try to dull that powerful bishop on b3. And also, when Carlsen played bishop to e6, it broke the pin on the f7 pawn, which left the queen on g6 under attack. So white had to pull his queen out of the fire. And now, very calmly, pawn takes on e4. Radjabov played rook f1, unrelenting. But now Carlsen's queen found a very powerful square, queen e5, which makes it impossible for this knight on c3 to move because of the checkmate on b2. And the queen on e5 also coordinates very well with the bishop on g7. It defends it. And so often in the Dragon, we see in positions where white's dark square bishop is traded off, having a queen or a bishop on this long diagonal, the diagonal from a1 to h8, for black completely protects this king. As long as that diagonal is covered, white really has no way to be able to checkmate the black king. Even if white can get his rook on h1 and go queen h7, so what? Black will just put his king on f8, and the queen or bishop, or in this case both, along that diagonal, cover enough important squares that the white king will never be in any danger. So after Carlsen played queen e5, I think Radjabov was already starting to get nervous because he understood that his attack is starting to stall and black's position is starting to become very good. And Radjabov played rook takes f7, which is really the only try here. And Carlsen continued with a natural move, taking the bishop and simplifying the position into a game where black is clearly better. However, Carlsen missed a nice move here that would have wrapped things up a little more cleanly. And if you want to find it, by all means, pause the video here and go ahead. So Carlsen captured on b3 here, but the move that he should have played is rook to f8, which is a very fearless move, rook f8. So if white goes bishop takes e6, then simply queen takes e6, and white's very happy to do all of these trades. He's simplifying the position and making it easier for him to win. So after rook f8, what else is there that white can try? Not really much. The rooks and the bishops are coming off the board here. He can't go rook to e7 because then rook f1 with checkmate. So he's forced to trade the rooks, and then these bishops, these light sword bishops, will also be traded. And keep in mind, in these positions, this bishop on g7 is still so powerful along that diagonal, and he can even take the knight here in the future and convert the position to an easily winning queen endgame. So rook f8 would have been close to lights out. But Carlsen played very natural. Bishop takes b3, pawn takes, and then he continued with g3, the pawn only being 2 squares away from making a queen with check. King to a2, Radjabov pulled his king out of there. And now rook to f8 with a similar idea to trade off the rooks. And here Radjabov trades the rooks and then continues with queen g4, searching for some kind of counterplay against the black king. Carlsen plays e3. Now he has another pawn that's very close to queening. Pawn to g6, a necessary move by Radjabov to create some threats. That pawn restricts the black's king and, of course, can coordinate with the white queen for some checkmating possibilities on f7, for example. So pawn to g6, and here Magnus Carlsen, the strongest player in the world, blundered. He played pawn to e2, and after this move, the position is no longer winning. This would be a good chance for you guys to pause the video and try to find out why not. What can white play here to save the game? After black plays e2, this position is now a theoretical draw after the move queen to d7, threatening checkmate on f7. If black blocks the checkmate with queen e7, simply queen c8 check, forcing queen to e8. And now he can go queen f5 check. The king would be forced to go to g8, and now queen d5 check with a forced draw by perpetual. Whenever the king's on h8, the white queen goes to f5. Whenever he's on g8, the queen goes to d5. And when he's on f8, queen f5 check. And in this case, king e7 is not possible simply because the knight can take on e2, and now it's actually white who's fighting to win this position. However, after the e2 blunder, Radjabov failed to find queen d7. I think so often in positions where someone knows they're worse for almost the whole game, psychologically it can be hard to find good opportunities because you have the mindset that your position is bad. So Radjabov didn't recognize that he could actually save himself with queen d7, and instead he blundered with the move queen f3 check, handing the win right back to Carlsen. Queen f3 check, Carlsen played king e8, queen f7 check, and king d8. Again, not possible to play knight takes e2 and eliminate the pawn because of the coordination of that queen and bishop. Queen takes b2 checkmate. And how else can white stop that pawn from making a queen next move? Queen g8 check, king d7, queen f7 check, queen e7, and the checks are running out. Queen f5 check, and king d8. Queen a5 check, and b6. No more checks against the black king. White played queen d5, one last desperate attempt, but now black simply makes a second queen. Queen a8 check, searching for a possible perpetual, but it doesn't exist here. King d7, queen b7 check, king hides on e8, and Radjabov resigned, seeing that if he brings his queen to the back rank, the checks run out very quickly here. Queen d8, and queen c6 check. He can go queen d7, the check here, and now king e7. He can try to get his knight into the game, but now the king just runs up the board. Knight f4 check, king f5, and white is out of time. So I thought that was a very interesting game where Magnus Carlsen was able to uphold the dragon's honor and win a great game with black. White chose to sacrifice a lot of material early on in that game and try for a big attack, but black had all his defensive resources in line and was able to win a very complicated, very crazy game. So thank you for joining me. Please stay tuned for more dragon videos in the future.
Nope. 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 Cool.